All right, I've been looking forward to this conversation all day. From Spotrac, Keith Smith, who does a heck of a job covering the NBA, is with us once again on the Rip City Drive. And Keith, I thank you for your time. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum didn't have their normal offensive output in Game 1 against Orlando, but Derek White with 30, Peyton Pritchard was huge off the bench. How much does it help them, the fact that Coach Mazzulla is willing to play guys throughout the regular season in this situation now where if your key guys don't have it going down, they can have confidence knowing other guys can step up and make shots?
Yeah, it's huge, obviously. I think Missoula put it best. It was at one point last year when they were going through a little bit of injury stuff. And one of the things they asked him is, how do you get these guys ready to go? And first he put a lot of it on the other players. He said, it's Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, empowering these guys to shoot and be the best, versions of themselves. But that's where he paused. And he said, we don't ask anybody to come in and be somebody they're replacing or somebody who's having a poor game be them. We just want them to be the best version of themselves. And that's a huge part for the players. That gives them confidence to just go out there, play free, play loose, and play well. And it's really paid off.
Yeah, the Celtics look terrific. And I was going to ask about Jaylen Brown. I had read something or heard from someone that he had an injection maybe a couple of weeks ago for inflammation. Is he in a position where you think he's going to be fine throughout the postseason, or is that something to monitor?
Yeah, it's very much wait and see. Yeah, we'll find out here more, as this goes along. He said he came out of Game 1 feeling pretty good. Everything, went about where he was. But as you watch, you could see he's limited. He doesn't have quite the same explosion that you see from him usually when he's really good at getting up and over guys for baskets. You just didn't necessarily see that from him in this game, but he still was, fairly effective. He's become a guy who can really play a little bit slower. He can use his strength. He gets to his spots, and he does his thing. So it'll be worth monitoring. I think the hope is with the kind of every other day nature of the playoffs, and in the first round, you even get a couple extra days here and there, that'll help him recover in between games.
Who's more important to them, Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum?
Jason Tatum, and it's not even particularly close. I know Brown won the MVP of the finals last year and all that, but Jason Tatum is one of the best players in the league. He's going to finish top 5 in MVP voting this year. He'll be a first-team All-NBA player again. He's just an incredible all-around player. What he doesn't get enough credit for is his defense. He defends every position 1 through 5 pretty much every night throughout last year's playoff run, and they did it a little bit yesterday. They put him on the 5-man pretty regularly because they trust he's going to hold up and he's going to make good plays. And that's addition to being a great scorer and a very, very much improved playmaker.
We're talking with Keith Smith from Spotrac here, first round of the NBA playoffs. The Rockets last night, good defense. They were able to defend without fouling. They're a heck of a rebounding team. What can they do to get more from their offense against the Warriors?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. They just don't. One, you hope Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet will shoot better than the absolutely horrendous way they shot in this one. So that's the first thing you're looking for. But after that, I would play Jabari Smith Jr. more. I don't think the Warriors have a great match for him, especially if he's playing alongside another big. We saw multiple times where he was able to overpower Stephen Curry on a post-up to get a short turnaround. And then another time he put the ball on the floor and went right to the basket for an easy layup there. So he's a really good offensive player, and I think he could really help them. He's fallen out of the rotation some as the year has gone along, as they've gone more towards Tari Eason playing more minutes and then going into this double big lineup with Alperen Şengün and Steven Adams, which worked okay in this. But I think getting Smith more minutes, hoping VanVleet and Green shoot better. And then I would also put Eamon Thompson on the ball a little bit more. That forces you to guard him. It's kind of the old Ben Simmons corollary there, where if he's away from the ball, you just ignore him because he's not going to hurt you as a jump shooter. But if he's on the ball, he's good enough to get to the basket. That means you have to guard him.
I noticed Draymond Green with 37 minutes, 42 for Butler, 40 for Curry. I mean, they were terrific last night, but how long can they continue to play those type of minutes and have that type of energy?
Yeah, they're going to have to. They don't really have another choice. They don't have a lot of depth on this Warriors team. It's funny how things flipped. Early in the year, they were being lauded. Steve Kerr was regularly playing 11 and 12 guys, and they'd really rebuilt their depth and everything. And then now we're here in the playoffs, and it seems like he's got about 7.5 guys that he trusts to play any kind of meaningful minutes, and that's tough. So they have to lean on Curry and Butler and Green. And again, this is where you hope the every other day nature of the playoffs, maybe that can help you out a little bit with keeping those guys a little bit fresher. But it's a tough spot for them for sure.
You covered Ime Udoka when he was in Boston, someone you're very familiar with. Do the Rockets play like an Ime Udoka coach team? Is that what you see when you watch them right now?
Yeah, 100%. They're really tough. They're going to be extremely physical defensively. They kind of play with a take no crap attitude out there. They're not afraid to push back and deliver a hit on players and, knock guys down. And they'll smile and walk away after they do it, too. It's a tough group. The one thing is and this happened in the Celtics at times, sometimes they get a little too caught up in that. And it's like, hey, remember, the idea here is to play a game and to try to score points and do those things because, I've yet to find the team that, it scores a lot of points by, being extremely, physical and just knocking guys over. And that every once in a while you have a drive like that, but that's more for the defensive end. But they're a tough team. They're going to, challenge the Warriors. They're going to get into them. And I think if you could give me over-under odds on this or betting odds, I'd bet pretty heavily on this series being the one that has the first player ejected for some kind of physical confrontation.
Oh, there's no question. I'm with you on that 100%. Do you think the Rockets will make a run at Kevin Durant?
It's interesting. I'm not sure. I think they're telling everybody they're not interested in doing anything like that, and they don't want to add an older player because they want to stay with the timeline they're putting together. But I think they're playing a little bit coy there with that, and they don't want to give away anything. And they also want to see how this playoffs go for them. If they're out and early in this first round, and let's say it's 5, maybe even 6 games, and it's all games like game 1 where they can't score, all of a sudden Kevin Durant or making the Godfather offer for someone like Devin Booker. And remember, they own most of the Suns' draft capital. Moving forward, if that's something they wanted to do, it wouldn't surprise me. The playoffs tell us a lot about where you need to be as a team and what you need to fill hole-wise. And I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that this team needs to shore up their offense. So it wouldn't be surprised at all if we see them make a deal or two for a better offensive player when we get to the summertime.
Keith, we say this every year, but isn't it amazing how much better playoff basketball is? The intensity, the defense, the way players attack one another, and the way the game is officiated, the physicality in the games across the board. It's like mind-blowing, and it's like that every year. I loved every minute of all the games this weekend.
Yeah, same. As far as the players go and the attention to detail, you wouldn't know from a couple of the games the way they threw the ball all over the gym, but those were more forced turnovers than anything. But it's the valuing of every possession and the way players are able to lock in. Part of that is you're not worried about, all right, well, today it's we're on the plane and we're flying to play Sacramento, and tomorrow we're playing Golden State. So we're trying to do 2 scouting reports at once because we've got a back-to-back. You're able to lock in on this one opponent, and I think this is also what the play-in tournament has given us is the top 6 teams really have a week off, and they can spend a lot of time prepping, for the playoffs and getting things cleaned up for themselves and the teams that already know their opponents. They can lock in a little bit on those opponents too, and I think that just leads to better all-around basketball.
We're talking with Keith Smith from Spotrac. Game 1, Lakers and Timberwolves. What surprised you most with that outcome?
The number of open shots the Timberwolves got. By the NBA tracking data, which is admittedly can be a little bit wonky, they had 42 three-point attempts, and all of them were classified as open to wide open. That's simply not good enough, right? If you're the Lakers, you can't have that. That's absolutely horrible. But the Lakers kind of said, all right, we're going to load up. We're going to do what we can to keep Anthony Edwards from beating us to the rim. So they played heavy gap coverage that left shooters open. I think the problem was it was the wrong shooters. You left some pretty good shooters open. And this Minnesota team, I know if you just glance at the personnel, you're like, all right, guard DiVincenzo, guard Conley. If McDaniels is hot, guard him, and you're okay. But Naz Reid shoots it pretty well. Julius Randle had a hot shooting night, but he's not a bad shooter. This is one of the better shooting teams in the NBA this season. So you got to be really careful. If you're the Lakers, better effort, better execution, closing that down a little bit. That'll go a long way to making it a lot tighter of a game.
And that feels like a long series, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one where what you're going to see is the Lakers are going to make some adjustments. One of the adjustments is going to be every coach's favorite adjustment, the play better adjustment. If they make that one, they're going to be okay there. So I think we're going to see them. They'll play a little bit better. I think LeBron. He was not very good in game one on either end of the floor. That tells me we're probably expecting a pretty big night in game two. And I think they'll clean things up. Minnesota will cool off a little bit with the shooting. And I think this is set up to be a very long series.
What do you think happened in that game one Clippers Nuggets? Denver struggled through the first part of the game, but in that second half, they really cranked it up and played much better defense. What do you think the switch was for them?
Yeah, I think, part of what it was they started sending some really well-timed doubles to force a lot of turnovers. The Clippers got extremely sloppy with the ball. That allowed the Nuggets to crawl back in it. And I think that was, huge for them. I think the Clippers had to have left game one feeling like, man, we should have had a win here.
Yeah.
This game was ours and we didn't get it done. And then obviously, I tweeted about it during the game, but Russell Westbrook giveth, Russell Westbrook taketh away. But he gave us more than he took us away. I don't know. My Shakespearean language there is a little rusty, but he did a lot more positive than he did negative in that game. Now that might flip in a major way in this next one. I thought also David Adelman basically saying, all right, Michael Porter Jr. doesn't have it tonight. I'm going to go to Russell Westbrook to play the major minutes down the stretch in fourth quarter and in overtime. That was a huge adjustment for the Nuggets. Talk about teams though that don't have a lot of depth. They are precariously thin, and that's something they're going to have to figure out, especially if they're intending on this being a very long playoff run.
Hey, can you explain how a guy like Ty Jerome, who's kind of bounced around the NBA, I watched him when he came to Portland earlier this season, and he was awesome, and he was white hot in that game one win over Miami. Is it just a matter of finding the right situation, the right spot with the right coach to where he can utilize his skills? Because he looks great now.
Yeah, honestly, I have no idea. This is one of the more surprising things that I've ever seen in the NBA. I talked to some front office people earlier in last week with the playoffs getting started, doing both. This time of year, I'm always doing playoff prep and off-season prep. And one of the conversations we had was about Ty Jerome. And one of the things that they said was, this guy was like basically had it out of the league. Like he couldn't stay healthy. He didn't look very good. Now all of a sudden teams are like, all right, can the Cavs even afford to keep him? The roster's getting really expensive. Should somebody throw their non-taxpayer mid-level at him? It's one of the more unexpected kind of turnarounds of a career that we've ever seen. And, great for him and great for him for cashing in on it in a major, major way, which I assume he's going to do this summer.
All right, Keith, one more question for you. Detroit has been one of the best stories in the NBA this year. From worst to being a playoff team. How do you think they're going to respond to giving up that 21-zip run in game one today against the Knicks?
Yeah, I think the JB Bickerstaff, you looked at that and then you told the guys, now forget it. Put it out of your minds. We just needed to play the way we played for about 40 minutes of game one. We had about an 8-minute horrendous stretch of basketball. And I think what he can do to help is they got to find a way to scheme Tobias Harris more shots if he has it going. He had 22 points in the first half, then scored only 3 in the second half and only took 3 shots. It just, that was bad process by Harris, by his teammates, and by the coaching staff. You got to get him more shots. I think they'll do more to try to free up Cade Cunningham, whether that's trying to get him downhill a little bit more and challenge the rim, more in those matchups where he can either get scores himself against the smaller Knicks or try to get him in a position where he can be setting up like Jalen Duren at the rim. I haven't seen if Isaiah Stewart's going to go or not. He had a leg injury. My assumption was
he's out. He's out.
Okay, he is out. So that's going to be tough for them because now you got to go to Paul Reed, he's okay, but he's nowhere near as good as Stewart. So that's going to be just a bit of a challenge. So they're going to need a big night from Jalen Duren. I would also look for them to mismatch hunt a little bit more. See if you can get OG Anunoby and Malik Bridges off of Cade Cunningham. See if he can get at Jalen Brunson a little bit more. And then Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. are pretty good, but you need them to be even better in this game. You're going to have to score points to beat the Knicks. You can't have long offensive droughts. I know that sounds weird with a Tom Thibodeau coach Knicks team, but they're very, very good offensively. They're just not very good defensively. So you got to score points if you're going to beat them.
And how tough is Jalen Brunson, man? It took him a bit to kind of get into the flow, but once he found it, he looked like the guy that we know so well. Amazing.
Yeah, he is really, really good. And when you look at it, at his size, the way he's just able to completely control games, and he's starting to. Yeah, I know he's not at that level yet in terms of career longevity, but this is getting towards like the Chris Paul level,
Yeah.
where one of the best things about Chris Paul has been the game's always played at whatever pace Chris Paul wants to play it at.
Good point.
He wants to play fast, you play fast. Wants to play slow, you play slow. And Brunson's really starting to figure that out, and he might even change it up in games. There, that's a good, tough Knicks team. I think their challenge is Detroit's a good matchup for them because the Pistons are somewhat limited offensively. Their challenge is going to be when they play better offensive teams, probably in the next round against the Celtics. That's where the Knicks will really, really struggle.
All right, you can follow him on social at Keith Smith NBA with Spotrac and the Front Office Show. Keith, man, what a lot of fun. I appreciate the time. Enjoy the games, and we'll catch up in the future. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.